Hi, everybody. This is Dawn Mitchell, and welcome to Dawn of Sports. This week, I am so excited. I love talking to powerful women. She doesn't like to think of herself as one, but she is a force. I'm telling you, Amy Hockert, I have known her for a long time. You have seen her on Fox9. And if you follow her on social media, you're probably still laughing to this day. So Amy Hockert from Fox9 is joining us. And Jim, one of the reasons I also wanted to have Amy on is she is a sports junkie. And that's right up our alley, isn't it?
I think we can work with that.
Yeah. Amy, so welcome.
Thanks, Dawn.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you're here.
I'm really excited too. When you asked me, I was like, what, me? What? Really? Then you were like, powerful women. I was like, all in. Let's go. Let's do it.
Powerful women.
And before we get rolling, let me just let you know that we're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We want to thank our sponsors, Rudy Luther Toyota, Minnesota Masonic Charities, Natrium. Also, the best way to listen to this show or any show you like at talknorth.com, please subscribe to your favorite podcast app. It's free. It's easy. We have the best lineup in town. We have Russo, Gorg, LaPanta, Roy Smalley, Lavelle Neal, John Millay, Jeff Diamond, Mike Grimm, Randy Shaver, Alex Haugen as the producer, and Dawn. We're so lucky to have Dawn doing this show. So take it away, Dawn.
You know, Amy, many people, when they see you on Fox9, and they see you all glammed up, all beautiful, presenting the news. And then, especially this past year, when we did the Timberwolves, or it didn't matter what sport was rolling, you became the person that did all. People don't know this. Like, hey, we're going to do an hour special tomorrow. Amy, you're going to do it. You're like, all right, I'm in. But I was so excited because I knew what not only, and I hate to say sports fan, but you are active, you watch it, you're athletic yourself. Let's start first with when we did Timberwolves together. When they first threw it at you and be like, all right, you're going to be the face of all these on our web and on our TV. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think going into it, I don't know that they knew what this was going to look like. And I for sure didn't know what it was going to look like either, because when you come from news, it's such a tight space. You know, you don't have a lot of room to share opinions or show personality, other than when you're tossing to Ian doing the weather or whatever. So it was a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but it really is so much of who I am that it became so freeing. And at some point along the way, I remember even asking, Mim and Kelly, our bosses, like, is this okay? Am I doing okay? Should I reel it in a little bit? Because you have to check yourself too. Like, am I getting a little too out there? But they just let me kind of roll with it. And it just became probably the most fun I've had in the 20 plus years I've been reporting and anchoring.
And I loved, too, because many people think, oh, everything is in teleprompter. Well, in sports, it's not. Like, we're just riffing it, right? Like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, when we do these specials, it's just us and a camera, and we're talking. Like, there is not things written in teleprompters. There's not anything scripted. Your notes, you've learned to take, like me, just like bullet points of what you're hitting next. Was that freeing for you? Was that fun? Or was that, like, nerve-wracking at first?
It was terrifying, Dawn. It was so scary. And it's so funny you say that, because so when Dawn's doing sports, or when anybody's doing sports, but I'm looking in the teleprompter at what they have in there, and there's no, Dawn, don't kill me. There's like misspelled words. There's words missing.
Because we've got like 5 seconds to put it together.
And I'm like, oh my, and I'm just scared for her on the set. Like, is this going to be okay? Is she going to get, and of course, that she's a pro and you guys get through it, but your brain is just trained in a different way where you can just kind of talk. And like you said, riff about sports. And I think because you know it so well, it comes from a natural place, and it just feels confident and fun. And that's where I hoped to kind of move to while I was doing this, and kind of evolve to that place where it was less like, okay, I got to get this, say it this way, or here's this one thing I want to get in there, and as opposed to just flowing with it and just letting it kind of unravel naturally.
Yeah, I think when the way we have things structured at Fox 9 is it had to be a little more regimented when we went to computers basically running the control room, right? Where sports before wouldn't put anything. It'd be like ad lib over video, right? And people are like, what? But everything has to be so structured. So I think for all of us in sports, we just kind of throw something in there. Like, and 9 times out of 10, what I put in there is not even what I say, right? And I know sometimes, like, even Kelsey will look at me like, what? I'm like, I just had to put something in there to fill up that time, right? But then while you're talking, you're like, well, oh no, I remember this. So I found working with you was such a joy doing this because your love of basketball came out, your love of people. If we had John Krasinski on, or if we had Max from K-Fan on, you just lit up. So what is it about, like, kind of interviewing people that share that same passion for the sport that you have?
It's funny because just as Jim was kind of ticking off all of these names, all these local sports journalists, and it just makes me so happy. When you said John Millay, I was like, oh, I love that guy.
He's the best.
I've never met him, but I am the biggest fan of what he does.
He's so fantastic.
I just, and for those who may not know, he covers, the Minnesota State High School League sports. And so he's all over the state, literally covering, small town teams. And he just brings out the best stories about people. And it makes you fall in love with sports at a sort of different level than just, surface level fandom. So I appreciate so much the journalists in this town. Jim's one of them too. Came in here and I'm not just saying a little starstruck because I'd never met Jim in person. After, reading, my whole life, basically, just reading his stuff. So it's an honor. And I always tell people, like, I'm not a sports journalist, right? I can't do like what Don does or Jim does. It's a totally different world. I'm sort of this fan that comes in and just brings that perspective because Dawn can't be a fan,
Right.
when she's covering the Vikings, as much as I try to get her to like school chant during her live shot, she can't do it, right? She can't do it. And you guys have to stay, very neutral while you're covering this, but still, tap into some of that excitement too, which you guys do such a great job of. But make no mistake about it. I am not a sports journalist. I just feel like maybe I can represent some of the fans, but then bring in some of the interviewing skills and knowledge of the game, that the small bit of knowledge that I have into it, and just kind of meld all of it together.
Jim, how does it feel that she said she almost was fangirling over you?
I don't believe her. So
It's true.
I'd be embarrassed if I thought she was actually being serious.
I told my dad, I was like, no, you're not going to believe who I get to go hang out with. He's like, no way. Like, yeah, it's true. It's true.
Well, what I love about, and it's just your being, it just happens to be on sports, but if you follow Amy at all on, is it X or Twitter? I still call it
Twitter.
It'll always be
Okay.
Twitter.
It's Twitter. We don't have to change the name because he changed the name. It's Twitter.
Yeah, it's Twitter. I know that Amy is going to say what I'm feeling, but sometimes I can't say, and I'm talking in a good way. Like sometimes you'll just do the meme. I think there was one of like a woman exhaling with a cigarette after we're like a big win, and you're just like, I'm like, that's the pulse. Like that is the pulse of what everyone was thinking, and you do it so succinctly and so funny that I'm so happy that you have different outlets to see the Amy to let people see the Amy that I know.
Well, thank you. That's really sweet. Yeah, that was Mrs. Robinson, and I still get called Mrs. Robinson to this day, like a year later, which is kind of creepy.
I'm glad people still get the reference. That was like that was like the first great movie I ever watched and said that was a great movie.
Right? Exactly. So it's interesting because again, our bosses are sometimes, social media, you're funny on Twitter or whatever, and they're like, you should try to bring some of that into the newscast more. And I just think so here's the truth. This is the truth, and I'm not just being modest or whatever. I am not really funny in real time, but if you give me like a beat or two or 10 minutes, I could come up with something, right? So in real time conversation, I'm super shy and like socially awkward, I feel like, but on social media, I think for a lot of people, it gives you that place where you can just kind of, mold what you want and then think about it for a while and then send it out, and it's okay.
So I disagree though, and I see you and Kelsey kind of giving Ian or Randy the business. What I do love about Fox 9, people always say, what's Amy really like? Well, that's what you're really like. That's what Ian's really like. I love that when you sass him and give him the business because it's in such a kind, nice Amy way, but funny.
Yeah. Well, Kelsey leads the band on that one. She is the kind, funny one for sure. And then I just kind of ride her coattails. But yeah, it's really fun. We have a lot of fun. And I think just being comfortable with people you work with can open up so much. And it just lets you put your guard down a little bit more. And so, yeah, that's probably the most fun that we have is just hanging out together. I mean, when you have this kind of schedule, these kind of hours, if you're not loving the people that you are hanging out with, then you're not going to last very long in that setting. So I love them. Yeah, they're great.
How did young Amy first become interested in being a news broadcaster and a journalist and just kind of sinking your teeth in all that?
Yeah. I think in high school is when I really started to realize this is what I want to do. And honestly, it goes back to like being socially awkward and I was not a kid that went out and had friends on a Friday night and go to the football game. Like I stayed home and I watched 2020 and that was my thing. And I loved it. Like I loved being independent and I didn't feel like I was missing out really ever. And so I would stay home and I'd watch the news magazine programs, as we used to call them. And I used to just really love that format and just kind of getting deeper into something. And I think it's probably equivalent to now, like the true crime podcasts or the docuseries that we watch now. Like that's what we had back then. And it was just so addicting to me. And then that's when I really started to realize like I really have a passion for being curious and asking questions and figuring things out and telling stories. And then you just dive in and you either sink or swim in this business, right? I mean, you've been doing it as long as I have and in a different way too, because you had different challenges coming up through sports. But I just really loved it from that point. And I went to college knowing I was so lucky what I wanted to do, and did campus news and all of those things. And then you move around markets, right?
What was your first market?
So while I was still in college, I went to Morehead State. KVLY is the NBC affiliate there. And while I was in college, I interviewed for a job where it was weekend, early mornings, like when the Today Show would toss it back to the local stations for a quick news update.
Right.
That was me. And I was I think a junior in college at the time. And I remember getting in my car at the TV station after I'd been offered the job. And like the song Free Fallin' just came into my mind. Like, you know how that scene in Jerry Maguire where he's just screaming it at the top of his lungs. And like, that's all I could think about is like, this is the biggest dream come true ever. And so that's where it started. And then, that was my first job. And then I stayed in Fargo-Moorhead for a while, went up to Minot, North Dakota for a while. And then back to Fargo and then to Raleigh, North Carolina. And then I moved back home, jobless actually, because my mom needed some help with her health. And so I came back here without anything. And my news director in North Carolina called up the news director, Tumliner was his name at the time, at CARE, and said, "Hey, can you just throw her a bone, just give her something?" So I started reporting there, doing health stories. And then the weekend anchor left about 6 months later, and I somehow fell into that job, and then was there for 6-7 years, something like that.
Yeah, that's when I first saw you. At CARE,
yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah, so it's been a journey.
I want to hear more from Amy and Dawn, but let's take care of the business now. When I listed our many journalists and great people we have on the network, I forgot to mention John Krasinski is one of the stars of the network, does the John Krasinski Show on the Timberwolves, and he and I do the Viking Update Show as well. Thanks for listening. We do appreciate it. Again, we're coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services Studio, and we want to thank longtime sponsor and longtime supporter of women's sports, Rudy Luther Toyota.
Ready for a women-forward car dealership? Rudy Luther Toyota empowers their many women on staff in sales, management, and service. Whether you are looking for a new Toyota or pre-owned vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota has something for everyone. Every vehicle comes with a Luther Advantage. 10 cents off fuel and car wash discounts at holiday stations, Luther Advantage warranty, and 5-day return policy on pre-owned vehicles. Located just 5 minutes west of downtown Minneapolis, off 394 and General Mills Boulevard. And they're also hiring. Want to join the team but don't know where to start? Visit rudyluthertoyota.com today.
Another Minnesota company doing great things for our community, Minnesota Masonic Charities.
When people think of the Freemasons, they often think of secret handshakes and unusual hats, and of course, the pancake breakfast. Minnesota Masonic Charities would prefer that you think about the work that they do right here in our community. Places like the Masonic Cancer Center at the University of Minnesota or the Masonic Children's Hospital and the Masonic Home in Bloomington. They are just a few examples of the important work that the Freemasons support here in Minnesota. As part of the largest fraternal organization in the world, Masons have consistently answered the call when it comes to charitable needs. I am happy that Minnesota Masonic Charities has chosen Minnesota Bound and this podcast as a place to help spread the word. We look forward to learning so much more about their many programs here in the weeks to come.
Now's the one where I get excited, and Dawn tells me I get very excited.
This is his BFF, Amy.
Okay.
Natrium, N-A-T-R-E-U-M. I'm going to also use a phrase I used the last time I mentioned Natrium with Dawn around, which is, it's not Cheech and Chong's basement, okay? You go into the Natrium store or the Wildflower store, which is their sister company. Go into a Natrium or a Wildflower store. They're beautiful. It's wood. It's incredibly clean and nice. The sales associates are very professional and friendly. It's a great experience. I know because I've been in them and I bought stuff there. They have dips. They have oils for your gut health. They have balms for arthritis, muscle soreness. They have drinks. They have gummies. As I always tell you, I use it for sleep and sometimes for sore muscles. My wife loves it for sleep. Also, if you're having a night where you don't want to have a drink, but you want to just have that take the edge off feeling, you can take one of the gummies. You'll have a very relaxing night. You'll wake up without a hangover. I never thought I'd be into this stuff, but it's good and it works. Natrium.com, Natrium. There's a Natrium or a Wildflower near you, or go to natrium.com and order.
Well, Amy, I know Care 11 was where I first, and I say this in a journalistic way, fell in love with watching you before I even met you, because your voice is like velvet. But you're also, and when I met you, I'm like, she's exactly who she is on TV. You know, some people feel like they have to deliver the news like this, you know, and they're a totally different person away from it. You found even early on, gosh, it must have been hard to come home, have to help with your mom, and then be on air in like the area that you grew up, right?
Yeah. It always was a goal of mine to get back here some way, somehow. So this is such a great news market, you know, for people who aren't familiar. You know, if you travel in other places in the country, I think you'll see that we are so lucky here. We have so many great options and the people who are on the air here. And it used to be more this way. I think now it's more of a revolving door just because the business has changed so much. But, you know, you had your mainstays. And so for me, when I was at CARE, before I went to CARE, my biggest role model, the person I really loved, was Joan Steffen.
Yes.
And I talk about fangirling. I mean, every time I think messaged me one time on Facebook and I just about died. It was amazing. You know, she's somebody who just the warmth and the authenticity, and you just felt like she cared about the news she was delivering to you. And that to me was just the biggest goal, is just, you know, I don't want to just come up here and read. And so she really was the person. So to then be at Care 11, you know, where she used to be, and do similar jobs, it was really a dream come true. And I was so grateful for that opportunity. And I got to report a ton, got to do quite a bit of just fan sports reporting, because our EP at the time, Lonnie, loved the Twins. And so every meeting it was like, well, what can we do with the Twins today from a news angle, which was great. So I got to go out there a lot and cover the Twins. But yeah, it was a great time. And I really appreciate, you know, everybody who had a part in just helping me grow. We had so many veteran reporters at that time. I mean, I could list them all off. It's crazy. Like, everybody around me had been there probably at least 10 years, and you just learned. You're a sponge, and you just soaked it all up. So yeah, it was good stuff.
And what was your journey to get to Fox 9?
Well, gosh, okay, how to nutshell this. So I ended up, after CARE, I ended up leaving the business for a bit because I got married, and my husband was living in Miami and then DC. And so I was commuting for a while back and forth to DC. I was doing the weekends at CARE, and then the weekdays I was in DC. So I was working a couple days a week. And then I had my first baby in 2008. And so I commuted for a while with her. She's a great flyer. That was working great. And then until it wasn't, right? Yeah. And so then I was like, this isn't really working so well. So at that time, I decided I was just going to leave and move to DC with my family and stay there and look for something there. Tried to apply for every job you could think of, PR and government jobs, things like that. And I don't think I got a single call back or email back after applying for about 100 different jobs. And because how do you translate? I'm a news anchor. What does that mean? And how can you help me?
Most people don't know.
Yeah,
right?
You just read words off a teleprompter. So that was a tricky transition. I ended up working for Rick Captella doing Bring Me the News, which is now, it's still going. It's an internet based sort of web-based news site where it's like a clearinghouse where they kind of pull the best of from everybody. And now they do a lot of their own original content. But I worked for him and actually eventually became VP of News there and was kind of like a news director, was in charge of the newsroom. And that was interesting. Hiring and firing and budgets and all of that stuff was not my thing. I am appreciative.
I can't picture you firing someone.
Oh my gosh, it happened. And
wow.
It was brutal. Anybody who has to do that for their
It must
job,
have hurt.
I really hats off to you. I can't imagine anybody enjoys doing it, and it's people's livelihoods.
Yes.
That was tough. But I learned a ton and grew a ton, and it then sort of gets me prepared for my next role too. So I'm just doing this job and doing radio from my. Let me go back. Sorry. Again, I tried to nutshell this and it's not possible. So then we moved to Ecuador.
We have all the time in the world,
good.
so take your
We
time.
moved to Ecuador.
Stop. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we lived in Ecuador for 2 years. So at this point, I just had my second child. So my daughter was like 2 and my son was about 8 months old. And my husband, who worked at the time for the Foreign Service, got a job where he was in charge of security at the embassy in Quito, Ecuador.
Wow.
So up and we go, and we moved there for 2 years. And I continued to work for Bring Me the News. I did local news radio updates from my closet in Ecuador, covering Minnesota news. Yeah, I mean, this was the very beginning of you can do your job from anywhere.
Did you introduce yourself that way?
I did
in
not.
a closet in Ecuador.
I did not.
Here's your Minnesota news.
In fact, there was a local writer who shall not be named who actually called me out on it and was like,
what?
This is a travesty that she is in Ecuador trying to, look like she's doing Minnesota news. And I was like,
somebody from the Strip?
Sorry. Nope. And I'm sure this person's very nice and was just doing their job or whatever. And I've never met this person, but anyway, so I just felt like, is this not okay?
Well, we do international news on Fox 9 sometimes, and we're not over.
Now you don't bat an eye.
At the
Now
Gaza
it's like,
Strip. So
you
should have played it. It should have been like from the Ecuadorian
bureau.
Bureau.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was looking for that word. We haven't. The Bring Me the News has an Ecuadorian bureau.
That's how big we are.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I had an opportunity to come back and take over the newsroom and be VP of News, and that was just a cool opportunity that I never thought I'd be able to have. But I needed to be in house. I needed to be in downtown Minneapolis. So we moved back after my husband's tour was up. We decided let's move back. And then, he continued to travel overseas and work overseas. He was in Iraq for a year, and he was in Afghanistan for a year. And I had my mom. I lived with my mom here, and she helped me take care of babies. And while I went to work downtown, and we did that for several years until one day I got a phone call from the then news director at Fox 9. Mim Davey, and she said, "Hey, would you ever think about getting back into TV?" And I was like, I guess, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it, but maybe. So she said, let's have lunch. And so we talked about it, and we were able to carve up what ended up being just an awesome, perfect kind of opportunity where I could do long form stories, features, fill in on the anchor desk when they needed me. But mostly I just kind of did my own thing, and I got to choose the stories I wanted to do and take my time. And it was like a dream scenario for me. So I did what I don't know that anybody else in the history of TV news has ever done. I left and I came back, right? Most people leave and they're like, see ya, life on the outside is way better than these hours, and working holidays and that nonsense. But no, I loved it. So lucky to be back.
You know what? I think just hearing the story, I did not know you lived in Ecuador, but what I hear first and what I do love is family first. Family first, kids first, up for the adventure.
Yeah.
And life is what you make it. And that's when the opportunities come. And I think sometimes when I talk to, younger men and women that are in college, and they just want the straight path. And I'm like, life is not a straight path. You can always return. I don't like the word back. I always say that. Not only because I've broken my back twice, but because you can never go back, but you can return. Mm-hmm. You can return to something better. And you don't even know what opportunities come your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say too that it's about relationships, and especially in this business, being good to people and having a reputation. If I would have had a horrible reputation, Mim would have never called me. It's just that kind of a town. It's that kind of a business. Mm-hmm. So I like to think that, if you're kind to people over the years and respectful of people no matter what, even when things get dicey and heated because you're on deadline, and I've not been perfect at that, trust me. But as long as you make an effort to be good to people, I think it comes back around,
Weirdest story you've ever had to cover?
Okay. I don't even know where to start. Okay. Weird ones. I've got it. Okay. So this was the moment I realized I needed to leave North Carolina.
Oh.
All right. So Fayetteville, North Carolina is a military city outside of Raleigh, where I was working. And so Fayetteville elects the first African-American mayor ever, which is a really big deal in that state, in that part of the South. It was a huge deal and such an amazing story. And I show up to work the next day, and I get the assignment to go down and profile, this new mayor. And I'm super excited. And we get down there and we're interviewing him. And I get a phone call halfway through the interview, and I don't take it. And I check the message afterward, and it's my news director. And he says, okay, so here's the deal. We just learned that the mayor is single, and he is a looker. So here's what we're going to do. I need you to go to the grocery store with him and walk around the grocery store and just kind of get reaction, especially from the ladies. Like, what are you thinking? What? Yes, Dawn. And I was horrified. And then I'm still basically a cub reporter at this point. I'm not even in my home state. I'm in the middle of nowhere with no friends or family or support. I'm like, if I walk from this job today, I'm on the street. So I said, well, can we strike a balance there? Can we do something else where maybe I know he loves to, he's a huge bicyclist. Can we just get him out doing an activity where he's, and just talk more about kind of how he's, loves bicycling. He's like, yeah, I don't know. And then he got another call and he had to go. So I was like, okay. So I talked to the photographer and I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so we go to the park and I have him, riding his bike around, and we talk a little bit about his love of bicycling. And I didn't go to the grocery store. I didn't do it. And
Good
so
for you.
I came back to the station and the story aired, and the news director called me in and he said, what was that? And I said, well, this is a get to know you piece of the first African-American mayor in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I started crying. And he said, I appreciate that you are trying to stand your ground, but he's like, this is not the place to do it. So, and at that point I knew this was not the place for me. Right. Yep. So, it took me a while to kind of get my stuff together, and put in my couple of weeks, but I said, I have to go back home.
Yeah.
And, my mom needed me, and that was just the nudge that I needed to just leave everything behind and just go help her out. So there you go. That was the craziest story.
That is crazy.
And then, I don't want to throw him under the bus. Like it was
No,
that
but-
kind of a time
that's
where
really, really cringy.
Yeah,
it's super cringy. And I think you look back now with eyes that, how we do that now? We look
Yeah.
back with our eyes now on things that happened
Yeah.
20 years ago. And we go, oh gosh, that was awful. But at the time, that's kind of what people did. And so it doesn't make it right. But yeah. So
But
that was weird.
I always believe, and I still do, but it's harder when you're younger, that you have to police your own career first. Because sometimes your bosses have to answer to other bosses. Right. And Jim, I think on the show we've talked about, if not, years ago, I was asked, and I'm not going to say who I was working for, but I wasn't living in this state, but I was asked to do a ski report, and I don't ski, but I figured I can learn. And I'm like, okay, I'll go ski down a hill and do a little ski report at the end. I'm athletic. And then they said, in a bikini.
No.
Back in the days where, like,
Dawn.
No.
like you were in your 20s and, I laughed. And my boss was like, that's a no. I go, that's a hell no. Like, no. And like it came out before I thought about it, right? It's like, and they said, okay. Well, I said, first of all, I'll be the laughing stock. Like, and I'm serious about my sports career. And the poor woman that did it was a laughing, got, people laughed at. Because I'm like, no. And that's coming from your boss saying, hey, well, I'd like you to do, it wasn't like you have to do this. If it was a have to, it would have been like, thank you for your 2 weeks. It was this is a side thing that we're going to do. It's just going to be a quick update. And I'm like, I'm not doing that in a bikini. And now you look at people like, no, that would never, I go back then, that happened. And that was actually an offer to me. So I say sometimes like you have to pick and choose your battles, but you have to police your own career.
100%. Yeah, I can't. I think you guys need to have me back on so I can interview Dawn and I can interview Jim because you guys have the best stories. And so I think I need to work that. I should have made that part of my deal coming on. Like you need to let me turn the tables and talk to you guys.
You're welcome to come back. And when you come back, we'll let you take over the show.
That would be fabulous.
Oh my
and
God,
then I get to interview
reverse.
you guys.
Yes.
That would be the best.
Thank you.
I'll just say no comment the entire time.
All right, before we let you go, I want to kind of do just a quick kind of like a rapid fire, but and just speak from fandom. Speak from your heart.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Favorite Minnesota Viking?
Randy Moss.
Ooh, twin. Favorite twin?
Torrey Hunter.
Oh, good one. Why do you love the Lynx?
We don't have all day.
I know.
I'm obsessed with Courtney Williams right now. She's the one I'm obsessed with right now. But I'm so ashamed that I was not on this train way earlier than I should have been. I was a casual fan and now I'm a rabid fan, and I feel I carry a lot of guilt for not being a rabid fan earlier. This team is phenomenal. I was just listening to Lindsay Whalen on the way in. She was doing an interview, and I can't say enough about these strong women and what they're doing for the sport and for young girls coming up. It just makes me almost emotional thinking about it,
Yeah.
It does. Having a daughter in sports, it makes me emotional thinking about it.
Volleyball star your daughter is.
She loves her volleyball. I love volleyball now.
Favorite Minnesota Timberwolf?
KG.
KJ.
I got to interview him one time, and it will always be the highlight of my career.
Did you have to beep it all out?
Always. No.
Oh,
no.
okay.
He was super casual, like super cool. I think maybe realized there was a new person in the room, and no, it was great. It was great.
Wild or North Star? I know you're little when it was a North Star, little itty bitty.
No, Mike Madonna.
Okay. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Madonna, 100%.
All right. Am I missing any?
And Madonna just moved back, I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I first got to town, I ended up covering the North Stars in the finals against the Penguins. And I went to a bar one night after a game with my coworkers, and there's Madonna sitting with his parents, and he looked like he was 12. He was all cheeks.
That's great.
I do have a friend who shall remain nameless that loved Zach Parisi and called him her hockey husband. And we were out once and I said, hey, don't look now, but your husband's here. She goes, wait a minute, Jared Allen's here? I go, your other husband. And she's like, she looked right through him and around. And I go, stop, like staring. She goes, well, where is he? I go, right behind you in the green shirt. And she goes, he's so little. He's so young.
Well, it's funny because having covered all the sports and been on the road with all these people, baseball and hockey players can get away with a lot more than basketball and football players.
Yeah.
Basketball and football players walk in the room and everybody's like, oh, that is a professional athlete.
Yeah.
Baseball and hockey players can do things on the down low.
Yeah.
And he wasn't little. He was just sitting down.
Right.
But,
Right.
she expected him to
But
be
he's not
larger
tall.
than life.
Right.
He's not
Yeah.
tall, and he's
Yeah.
just very
Right.
I mean, so many hockey players, they're really fit, but they're not big.
Yeah.
I did a story on the woman who stitches the jersey names for the Vikings on the back
Yes.
before she retired. And she had Adrian Peterson's jersey there. And I was like, can I try it on? She goes, yeah, let's try it on. I could barely get that thing on. I was like, oh my gosh. He's like, not that he's little, but I mean, he was all muscle and,
Yes.
I got a story that fits this. So I'm standing. This is back. I'm covering the Vikings. I'm standing next to Burke's locker, and Burke is like basically it looks like a chemist's lab. He's trying to get the exact perfect mix of protein, carbohydrates, energies, and he's like just it's like there are beakers overflowing, and these offensive linemen in the NFL, they have to find a way to maintain weight. You have to be
Yes.
320 pounds or you can't function. So he's like trying to figure this stuff out. And he was a big guy, and at that point he had a big gut because he had to have a
Right.
big gut. And he's sitting there trying to figure this stuff out. Adrian Peterson walks through the locker room, shirt off. His waist is about 18 inches. His shoulders are like 42 feet wide.
Arms full of muscles.
There's no fat. It's all muscle. And he's eating a muffin. And Burke goes, why do I even mess with this shit?
That's a great story.
One of my funniest was Marion Gabrick when he was here.
Yeah.
And he was sometimes would interview when he still had his skates on, the way the locker room was before it got really fancy. And so he'd be there and we'd be talking to him. And so I'd be talking to him normally. And then he took his skates off and I'm taller than he is, right? And I've got sneakers on or flats. And he looked at me and goes, really? And then the next week I have heels on and because I wasn't thinking, I had heels on. I get in there and he takes his skates off and he's super short and he goes, really? That's all he would do. In his little accent, really? And I'm like, sorry, man.
Yeah.
I go, I
Sorry.
came out of the womb your height. I don't know.
Exactly.
Well, Amy, thank you so much. I could talk to you all day long, but just as a person, I adore you. As doing news and sports, I am so in awe of news people. Because just how you have to carry yourself and just how you have to deliver the most horrible sometimes news, and just do it in a way that you're in people's living rooms and delivering tough news sometimes and information that I'm always in awe of my news compatriots. But then to also be able to share some of the sports with you recently and just kind of have that bond, it's been really special for me. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. When I was at CARE, I was looking across the street watching you too. And I've always just been such a fan. And I've learned from you too, which is awesome. So thank you.
And then I'll go, Amy, well, all right. Was I too out there? No, you were fine. I'm like, she is my litmus test.
No.
I'm like, okay.
We keep each other in
Was I
check.
too Boston there? Like, I'm the cream puff of Boston. So like, people think like I'm too much. Like, don't go there. But still, how am I in terms of Minnesota standards?
Right.
Like, you're just fine. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I did that with Jim too. Jim goes, I'm the wrong person to ask.
Well, thank you guys. And I do hope you'll let me come back
Yes.
and turn the table.
We're not
Yes.
going to let you come back. We're going to require that.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it. Thank you.